Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Field Watch from Formex. It's literally called the Field, so it's also a field watch. So look, whatever it is, that's what it's called. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank you, Formex, for sending this my way, kind of. I actually just purchased this outright, but I got a chance to purchase it before they were officially announced because I saw it pre-embargo and said, guys, just take my damn money. So nonetheless, I did get this guy from Formex a little sooner, and I feel like I should probably disclose that. But nonetheless, they know that I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk, but they did still sell me one. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size measurements on this little guy right here. And what we're going to find here is that it isn't actually as little as you might think. With the crown involved, we're looking at 43 millimeters. Without the crown, we are coming in closer to 41-ish millimeters. It's sort of a weird thing to exactly measure how this guy is size-wise, but anyways, they call it a 41. That's maybe a little bit generous in some ways. We have a face diameter here around 34 millimeters. The lug width on this guy should be about 20 millimeters. Yep. There it is, about 20. The lug-to-lug distance, which of course is the most important measure for people who have relatively smaller wrists, is going to be coming in here at a very svelte 47 millimeters. Not that bad. And then the thickness of it measures in at 10.6. Maybe feels a little bit thinner than that because there's kind of this little area down at the bottom here. But he's keeping all of the, well, it's keeping some of the complexity pushed down against your wrist rather than riding on top of it. So there is that. Next thing, a couple of things to kind of highlight about this guy. This is a watch that actually comes in a couple of different varieties here. The stock version of it comes with this Velcro bracelet, which requires this additional spring bar right here. And this is actually, this is one option. The other option is a leather bracelet complete with their little clasp here, with their quick adjust clasp. We'll talk about that later on. But one thing to note is that I have slightly treated this leather. Out of the box, it came to me looking like this. This is the second piece, the longer overstrap for the leather strap. And what we can see here is that out of the box, it comes looking a lot more, frankly, gray and dried out than it does here. I've done a little bit of treatment to the leather to, well, just give it a little bit more in the way of brown, as well as well, hydrate it some. So you're going to see that this looks a little bit different than some of the other leather straps that you'll see from Formex there. But there is that. And then finally, this review actually is based on about a week and a half of wear. When I got this guy, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to wear this for a long time. I'm going to give this as much wear as I possibly can. And so this guy was on there for a good long time, trying to balance out, wanting to get the review out quickly and wanting to, well, yeah, but nonetheless, so this is based on a fair amount of wear for me. And this is now very much a watch that I own, and so that's where the experience is. This is not a quick review in the sense of, oh, let's get it out quick right before the release. Nope, I just went for it this time. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting watch. And on to start with, on the good side, I like the size of it a lot. The lug-to-lug distance, it's a 41 millimeter nominally. It ends up wearing a little bit smaller than that, in my estimation. Part of that is that the lug-to-lug distance isn't particularly large. Part of that is that it's a relatively thin watch. Like I said, 10 millimeters, but it actually wears a little bit thinner than this. This, in practice, is a very unobtrusive watch on the wrist. Part of this is because it is relatively lightweight, but it feels like a smaller watch, I think, than it actually is. Certainly, you put it up against like a 36 millimeter watch. This is not tiny, right? But at the same time, it is absolutely good to go in that way. Next thing, this has a 150 meter water resistance, which is basically means you don't have to worry about water. The fact that it's also often sold on a leather strap means that, well, maybe you have to worry about water a little bit, but for the most part, especially if you're wearing it on the Velcro here, it's absolutely good to go. So that's a nice thing. Next thing, the case on this guy is a titanium case. This is titanium metal, and in fact, you can see that it has been, I'll try and zoom in a little bit and show you this, but this has been what feels to be some kind of a blasted finish on it, right? It feels like it has been, well, impacted repeatedly by some very small, fine blasting media. It is not the same kind of blasting finish that you find very often in, like, the pocket knife world. It is considerably smoother than that, but it is still a very matte finish. There is no polishing on this whatsoever. But the fact that this is a titanium case means that this watch is very, very lightweight. Adjusted here for my wrist, including the clasp and everything, this guy is going to come in at Let's see here, 2.46 ounces, as opposed to the watch that's on my wrist at the moment is the Omega Seamaster Professional 300, which given is a beefy boy, but we're coming in much, much heavier, right? So this is a very lightweight watch here. And as a result, that's great. But more importantly, you know, yeah, it's titanium, that's great, but titanium is also a metal that can scratch much more easily than steel. What they have done here is they've done a special treatment, and they're not giving a lot of details about that, whatever, not a huge deal. They've done a special treatment to bring the hardness up on the titanium substantially. They're claiming 900 Vickers hardness. I'm not super familiar with the Vickers scale, so at the same time, you know, usually I use the Bishop scale, because like Vickers, no, okay, anyways. I'm not 100% sure exactly where that gets you, but what I will say is that in the time of wearing this guy and not trying to be kind to it, right, I've seen absolutely no sign of scratching or snail trails on it. That'll probably change over time. You're liable to see them sooner or later, but still, it doesn't feel like one of those super vulnerable titanium finishes you've seen out there in the watch world. So that's nice. Speaking of durability, this guy has a sapphire crystal on the top of it. Sapphire crystals are a very good option, and frankly, they are not optional past about, I don't know, $300 or so. But it is nice to see that on here, and that's going to resist scratches a lot better than most. Next thing, the movement on this guy, which is not visible through the back of the case here, is a Sellita SW201-1 movement. This is an automatic movement, meaning that you are, as you move this guy around, there is a little weight in there. Actually, I'll show this off on the Omega, which does have an open case back. The Omega, this is a very different movement, of course, but you can see there's a little weight in there that's kind of going to move back and forth, and as that weight moves, it's actually winding the watch. And so just wearing the watch keeps the watch running. It has a power reserve of 41 hours, meaning you can take it off your wrist or you stop moving for 41 hours. Your watch is going to stop, so there's that. Next thing, this has a date movement, or a date down at the bottom here. It's saying it's the 27th, which is accurate. But in fact, I can come down here, and if I pull the crown part of the way out to the first position, given that it is currently 11 a.m. rather than 11 p.m., when it would be a bad idea to use a quick set, but if I turn the crown here in the proper direction, I can advance the date, and I can continue to advance the date over and over again to get through the entire month. And so it's very easy to put the watch on and get it set to the proper date just by going through and quick setting it. I'll bring it back to the regular date here. But nonetheless, so there is that. It also is a hacking movement, which means that if I pull the crown all the way out, we're going to see that it stops, the second hand stops, which allows you to set the watch very precisely, which is a good thing. It is not a chronometer grade movement, unlike the other ones. This is, unlike the other Formexes, that is. This has not been chronometer certified. It's a little bit of a disappointment, but at the same time, it's still been plenty accurate on my wrist, so, you know, I can't really argue too much about that. Next thing, I do like the face of it very much, and there are a couple of things specifically that I appreciate about the face. One of them is the fact that the hands on it are actually reflective. If I kind of cover this up, what you're going to see is that even in the darkness, you can very often find a little bit of reflection. Even in the darkest times, you can often find some light to read your watch by, so to speak, and that means that, well, you've got a better shot at reading this watch at any given moment than if the hands were flat, something or another, you know, white or whatever like that. So I like the hands very much, and frankly, the syringe-style handset, I think it's pretty attractive. It is also very, very well loomed. I'm going to go ahead and charge this off camera with a powerful flashlight, and what we're going to see is that this has loom like crazy. Every single one of the numbers is loomed. The date, of course, is not, but we see that there are markers at every single hour. It is very, very easily readable. It is super luminova. It is good to go all night long sort of illumination. I am a big, big fan of that. We can also tell which is 12, not only because it is labeled accordingly, but also because there are the two dashes up at the top here versus one everywhere else. This has really excellent loom. The second hand is also loomed, which is desirable for many folks. And actually, the second hand is loomed in two places, one back here and the other back there. So that's kind of a cool thing. Honestly, it's really nice loom. I was a little afraid, you know, because sometimes you get a little less glow from the different colors of loom, but no, it's good to go. So that's great. Next thing, the leather strap on this guy is very nice, and it's nice in a couple of different ways. One thing that's worth noting is I have actually trimmed this down personally. I'll talk a little bit about why later on, but it looks like a beautifully finished end of the leather strap for most people when you get it out of the box, right? But the leather strap on this is quite nice. One of the nice little details about it is they actually give you two lengths for this top piece, right? Because this top piece dictates how long the strap actually is. You get an extra, basically, inch, maybe more than that, but you get an extra, more than that. Oh, probably help if I did this on camera. But you get an extra amount if you swap in the bracelet for the other, or you swap in the strap for the other one. And it's a nice little detail that they're remembering that there are people out there with smaller wrists like myself. I wear about a 6.25-inch wrist, and that's a nice thing. But it is also pretty uniquely I mean, the way that you can adjust it fundamentally is by putting these little posts here into the little holes on the bracelet here, or on the strap, right? That's fundamentally how it works. But it has a neat little trick. So I'll put this back in here, and I'll go ahead and load this back in. And what we're going to see is this happens. See this little button right here? Well, if I press this little button, nothing happens. But if I push the strap in a little bit, suddenly the strap has gotten shorter. Right? So now the watch is a little bit tighter on my wrist. But let's say that I decide, that was a little too much. You press this button, you can pull it back out in any one of these increments, right? And what this means is you have a toolless quick adjust for very, very fine adjustment between these individual holes here that is able to adapt to your wrist. One other little detail that I didn't notice, although it has actually been present on the Formex Reef bracelet, and by the way, note that the bracelet buckle here is blasted to match the finish of the watch. That's a nice detail. But it turns out that to undo the bracelet altogether, you just grab both sides there. But if you just press on this side, that's actually enough. If you just press on this side, things are arranged in here so that pressing on one side alone presses this on, which allows you to adjust this and make it a little bit, in this case, looser on your wrist without even undoing the strap. That is a really, really nice idea. I am a big, big fan of that. But if you don't care for this particular strap, this kind of strap will work with any leather, right? This is quick release, on both sides here, so it's very easy to swap that around. But also, this is a generic 20mm lug width, so you can go ahead and use any bracelet you'd like if you don't decide you like that one. The other bracelet they include is a leather bracelet, and it is just literally, it's a spring bar in this side, and then it comes with a second quick release spring bar, and you just slip that through there. And then you can put the watch on that. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll use the quick releases on both sides here to be able to swap this in pretty quickly here. And the Velcro honestly looks pretty good too. This is probably the Velcro strap I have liked the most, and I'd like to think that's not just because I'm a simp for Formex at this point in time. They're doing pretty good work here, and one of the things I like about it is if you look at it, especially along the top, it is not just black, right? It is a little tricky to get at this quick adjust, quick release mechanism there, but once you get it in, it's good to go. And then what I do is I come around to the other side here, I put this little spring bar in. But I actually like this this Velcro strap a lot because on the top of it, on this surface here, you see a little bit of variation, right? It's not just all black. Instead, you see something a little bit more, well, I don't know, unique, a little more, I don't want to say colorful because it's all monochromatic, but at the same time, it gives a little bit more visual interest. You also see that you get a number of pads of leather, of Velcro, as well as this sort of, almost feels like a clamped on there plastic bit at the end, but that still just makes it feel a little bit more nice and luxurious than your average leather, your average strappy kind of bracelet. And this looks pretty good, right? And they have these available in a bunch of different colors. That's a beautiful thing as well. One of the nice thing about this guy is just the design of it, generally speaking. This has sort of a very cyberpunk feel to it, right? I'm a big fan of the face of this guy, as well as things like the font and whatnot on here too. It is not just another field watch, right? It is not just another, oh, look, we put the numbers on the dial so you can read it. Oh, look, we're military. This has a very cyberpunk feel to it, at least to me, right? Along with the overall styling of the case, which has some angles that are not necessarily expected. It almost, in a lot of ways, it feels a little bit more related to like the Bulgari Octafinissimo style case, almost a Genta-ish thing, than it does your conventional Hamilton style field watch. I'm a big fan of that because it is clearly a field watch, right? There's no looking at it and thinking otherwise, but at the same time, it's a little bit different. And so I like that a lot. Then finally, on the good side, there are a bunch of colorways available with this guy, right? It has a very, very teal blue color that they offer. They have a maroon, a gray, a purple, an OD green. And they also have different colors of the bracelets, the leather, as well as the Velcro bracelets. And honestly, making a field watch in a deep amethyst purple is kind of awesome, right? It's very bold. And if you look at their colorways, it's like, this is going to be interesting. For me, I'm basic. I went with the black because I think that is the color that's going to go best with most of my outfits. Hashtag Flashenbogger. But at the same time, Flashenbogger. Wow, that's like somebody who goes into a peat bog with a flashlight. Fashion blogger is what I meant to say there, but nonetheless, it's nice to see those various options out there. So to me, all of that is the good, is that it's got a nice, a bunch of different colorways available, a very neat design, a nice Velcro strap that's exceptionally thin on the wrist. It's got a very good, quick adjustable leather clasp on there. It has great Loom, reflective hands, a good solid movement that's easy to replace and repair. By the way, this is going to be a very easy movement to swap down the road if something goes wrong. It has a Sapphire Crystal blasted titanium case, 150-meter water resistance, nice lug-to-lug distance, and a very good size. On the great side to me, actually, is going to be the price here. This is an $800 watch. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, my God, that's a lot of money, Nick. Yeah, it is, 100%. You can get a bunch of really good watch for way cheaper than this, especially if you're willing to embrace quartz, which is going to be the better choice for most people in their daily life. But that said, for $800, you are getting a lot here, right? And $800 is on the Velcro, as pictured here. $975 becomes the price if you include a leather strap as well as their clasp, which is a very nice option for you. The thing is, for $800, they're doing pretty good work here. It doesn't feel like they're cutting corners. Right? Sure, I'd like to see chronometer graded, but there's not really that much offering of chronometer grade under $1,000. I know that that's an external cost for other people, but at the same time, the movement is still a very nice movement, right? It is still a very, very nice case with a hardened titanium case rather than just being boring titanium. It's still very nicely designed. It's still got great Loom. They still have a very, very nice clasp and a very surprisingly nice little Velcro strap here too. I am very, very impressed because this shows that conventional Formex effort. I've said over and over again about Formex's stuff. The thing I appreciate most is that they keep putting in crazy amounts of effort, right? So you're getting a lot more for your money than you do with a lot of the other Swiss brands. Certainly, like I said, it's not the cheapest thing, but it is ridiculously good for the price, and I think it is good enough that for a lot of people, especially if you don't live in a particularly formal circumstance, this could be a one-and-done sort of watch for you. And so I think, to me, that is absolutely a beautiful thing, and that would be the grade. This is a pretty solid price, even though it is a pretty expensive price. On the bad side, to start with, the font on this guy has been very polarizing, particularly the 3 and the 5. If you look at the 3 on its own, it looks like it could very easily be a 5, and vice versa. Actually, not as vice versa with the 5, but still, it is kind of a very weird font. I don't personally mind it, and frankly, I'd rather have something unique than boring. But for a lot of people, that's a non-starter. Whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, I am a little disappointed this doesn't have any bracelet option. Right now, they have a leather strap on it and whatnot, and with a very nice clasp, so that makes it feel okay, but I really wish there was a titanium bracelet on offer for this guy. If they were to do a Formex-style titanium bracelet, and Formex does amazing bracelets, oh, that would be amazing, and I really do hope it's in the works. Even if the bracelet ends up raising the cost of this to match the reef or something like that, I can see that being really attractive to a lot of people. A fully blasted bracelet with, oh yes, in full tie, that would be good. That would be real good. And if it's the same effort with the same micro adjustments and half links and micro adjustments and such that you get on the rest of the Formex lineup, yeah, that would be great. One of the slight disappointment is that the rubber bracelet off of the Formex reef does not fit. This is, of course, because the reef has larger lug width, but I kind of would have liked to have seen a first-party rubber bracelet option for this guy as well. I hope that's something they're going to be doing in the future because I think that would be a really nice choice. Next thing, this is a very much a nitpick, but I would like to see a little more distinction between the hour and minute hands in terms of their shape. Let me show you what I mean again. This is something that came up mostly late at night. I'm a person who generally wears a watch overnight, and the thing is, if you get up in the middle of the night, sometimes it can be a little tricky in your, shall we say, relatively foggy 3 a.m. sort of mind to look down at your watch and see exactly which one of these is the slightly longer one, especially when it's pointing at something or when they are very closely adjacent to one another. It would be very, very nice to be able to have just a little bit more distinction in shape for the hour hand. Make it a little wider, put a little crossbar across it. Something like that makes this just a little bit more clear which one of these is which when they are both shaped substantially the same. Yes, the hour hand is a little bit wider and it is certainly shorter, but that's something they could do to improve the readability a little bit of it. Next thing, I am a little disappointed that they did not do the same kind of chronometer grade accuracy guarantee. Even if it wasn't chronometer certified, I'd like to see some kind of an accuracy guarantee warranty. Like I said, mine has been running fine, but at the same time, it is a step down from some of their higher-end pieces like the Reef or the Essence. That was a bit of a disappointment. I didn't look closely enough, and I assumed it was at first, and even when I started writing my review, and then I looked and realized, oh, hold on, they're not doing that anymore. And so that's a little sad. You know, it doesn't come with the chronometer certification or anything like that. So it's just, that's a little bit of a disappointment. Next thing, the dial. If we take a close look at the dial here, and I'm going to try and zoom in so I can show this off, what you're going to see here is that the dial actually, here, you kind of need a raking light to see it. Let me grab a raking light real quick here. Come here, raking light. Where the heck is my flashlight? Really? Really, people? Really? Am I that much not a brilliant man? Well, so it seems, and so it goes. So I'm going to use this flashlight instead. Use a, let's see if I can get that down to a... Good thing I got a flashlight to review right here. Okay, so I'm going to try and do it... need a little more light than that. Yeah, let's try and do it this way. What you're going to see here is, potentially, you're going to see is that the dial is actually not completely flat. Instead, there is almost a little bit of a pie pan feeling to it, but there we go, that shows it off. See how right at this area right here, it starts to kind of ramp up a little bit? The dial kind of is concave. There's a higher part around all of the edges. There we go, we're seeing that. Whereas, rather than being completely flat. And this is, most of the time, completely unimportant, right? Most of the time, this doesn't matter at all, right? But at the same time, it kind of looks a little bit weird, right? It's not a strong enough design touch to really feel like it was super intentional, to feel like it was exactly what they meant to do, but it's also not so weak that it feels like an error. I feel like they just kind of tried to go for it, and in fact, you can even see with the Loom pips that the dial has kind of sloped up a little bit here, and it's a little bit of a deeper cut on this side than on that side, but it's just a little bit strange, right? It doesn't quite do it for me, and it feels a little bit strange. One other weird part about the face of this watch, and I'll try and kind of show this off to you, is that the face of it seems like it is rotated very slightly off center line. Like if you look right up the middle of the watch, it almost looks like the face of the watch has gone here. I'll try and show this off with a ruler here. It feels like the face of the watch is a little bit rotated askew this way. It is just barely visible, and in fact, I can tell myself it doesn't really exist, but it feels, and if we look at the crown too, it feels like the whole thing is very slightly tweaked that way. Not a big deal, and I've noticed that all of the ones on their website show that same thing, so maybe it's just kind of the nature of the beast. But it just feels a little bit weird. Or maybe I got the one they photographed for the website. I don't know which, but either way, it's a thing. Next thing, I would like to see slightly smaller options, right? This is, like I said, it wears a little bit on the smaller side, but this could be great in a 37, 36, 38 millimeter size. And similarly, I'd love to see one on the bigger size for the folks with gigantic wrists, right? A 43 might, fit some people a lot better than me. 41 is not such a bad size range to come in, especially when it's thin and small with a lower lug-to-lug distance, but at the same time, I'd love to see a smaller size. That would be a thing. Next thing, this guy is not a particularly, this watch doesn't dress up well. What I mean by that is that there are lots of sports watches out in the world, and I could argue that maybe this Omega is one of them. They could look just fine under a suit jacket and could look fine on your wrist playing freaking Frisbee or whatever. This guy is very, very much a fieldy watch. It is very much a workhorsey watch. It is not something that is going to look, particularly on the Velcro here, but even on the leather, it's not ever going to look particularly formal. This is not one of those watches that dresses up and down particularly fine. That is a fine thing to be, right? It's a decision, but unlike the Essence of the Reef, this is probably not going to be a one-and-done watch if you are very often in formal kinds of occasions. Next thing, on the clasp front here, I actually do wish that this adjusted just a little bit more. Now, I know what you're thinking, Nick, they have a toolless quick adjust. Shut up. You've already talked about this as being necessary, and indeed it is. But the thing is, this toolless quick adjust gives you just a little bit under a full set of holes worth of adjustment. And so for me, ultimately, what ended up happening is either they need to space these holes a little tiny bit more tightly so you get a little bit more granularity in setting the thing. But ultimately for me, in order to get this to a point where I was sort of in the middle of the range for my daily wear, which is what you want when you have a quick adjust kind of system, because you want to be able to make it a little tighter on days when your wrist has swollen up or is very small, and a little bit looser on days when your wrist is swollen up What I ended up having to do is actually cut off the extra tail. Because my wrists are relatively small, I had about this much more strap hanging off the back of it. So I just cut it off, and then I sanded this down a little bit. And then actually, because that removed a bunch of material that was previously inside here, that made the watch wear a little bit smaller and frankly a little more comfortably anyways. But until I did that, I couldn't get the fit quite right. Now, to be fair, you can do that too, right? It's not the end of any particular worlds, but at the same time, I would like to see just a little bit more adjustability for this guy. I think it would just be a nice little detail. So either make it a little bit longer in its range of adjustment, or make these holes a little tighter together so I can adjust a little bit more fine-grainedly the position there. So that is a little detail. It's at the level of it'll probably work out fine for you, particularly if you're willing to do this. But at the same time, if you're not sure you're going to keep the watch, this may not be a tack you want to take, right? Next thing, I'm going to kind of nitpick. Well, I've been nitpicking a lot here already, but if we kind of take a look at the bracelet as shipped, this is exactly, I took this out of the plastic in the package to show off on video for this review. This is not the most impressive looking leather, right? It is a very technically nicely done product. You see you got the Formex logo here, and it is relatively clean. But in practice, this ends up feeling very, very dry. It ends up feeling very, very gray. It doesn't end up feeling particularly brown. It wasn't until I conditioned the leather well that it really started to feel and look a lot like leather rather than some kind of weird vinyl cloth. Now, to be fair, there were going to be leather workers, oh my God, Nick, what did you do to that poor thing? There were going to be people who don't care for what... But the thing is, for me, as far as leather work goes, I wasn't super impressed with this bracelet, right? And the nice part about this bracelet approach is that you can swap this out anytime. Any leather worker who makes straps can make you a set of straps for a Breitling style deployant like this is. No problem, right? But at the same time, I wasn't super impressed by the leather out of the box, and it's the first time I've gotten anything from Formex that felt a little bit cut rate, that felt like it wasn't up to their best. And to be fair, their core competency is watchmaking, not bracelet making, but whoever they worked with on this, I don't think did them a lot of favors here. In a lot of ways, I feel like actually for many people, the Velcro strap is going to end up being the better choice. In a lot of ways, although I like very much the leather on there, this ends up feeling... This feels more cohesive to me as a look fashion-wise than it does on the leather bracelet. I mean, it looks fine on the bracelet, but at the same time, this is not a formal watch, and I think the Velcro makes it lighter. It makes it, it makes it thinner. Every part of this is kind of enhanced by that experience. So you can certainly do the leather, and I'm glad I did, and I'll probably swap it back and forth on a pretty regular basis, but at the same time, yeah, I'm not super-duper impressed with that leather work. Then finally, on the bad side, I really don't particularly care for the orange loom. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nick, that's vintage Super Luminova. That's how it looked back in the Grandpappy's watch, World War II. People start shouting things like that, and I get that that's what they're aiming for here. And to be fair, it's something that works a little bit better when the rest of the dial is a little bit warmer or something like that. But in practice, this ends up feeling like a black and orange watch. It ends up feeling very Halloween, or Mild Man at EDC, another channel, check him out. But anyways, it ends up feeling very kind of Halloween-y in a lot of lights. To be fair, in some lights, it really doesn't feel that way. And more specifically, in sunlight, it really doesn't feel as strongly that. I'm putting a very color-correct light on it from afar here, and what we see is it gets a little bit nicer, right? It ends up feeling a little bit, as you get more of the micro texture of the dial, which, by the way, is micro textured, it feels a little bit better, but oftentimes you look down, it's like, hey, Halloween. So I kind of wish that they had used a slightly less yellowed loom here on this guy. And also the hands don't particularly, the hand loom ends up feeling a lot lighter than the face loom. And so that's kind of an awkward thing right there. So to me, all of that is the bad, is that I don't really care for the orange and black color scheme here. The brown bracelet shipped very, very kind of pale and dry looking. I wish the adjustable clasp adjusted a little bit more. There is really no dressing this up. I'd like to see some size options. The curvature of the dial is not something I'm in love with. It's not a chronometer, even though the rest of their stuff is. I'd like a little more distinction between hour and minute hand and shape, like a rubber bracelet option or a titanium bracelet option, and the font is going to be polarizing. On the ugly front, honestly, for some people, that font is definitely there. For some people, the color scheme's definitely there. But again, remember, there are other color schemes. pardon me, on the website you might like more. Ultimately, nothing ugly here, so this is just a nice watch. It really is a nice watch, and I kind of feel like I'm becoming a Formex simp, right? Because the last three things I've looked at, in fact, the only three things I've looked at from them have all been really, really good. They are a company that is trying very, very hard, and if you look at what they have delivered here relative to what you get from other kind of brands, I'm pretty impressed, right? Because it is a thin watch. It's of moderate size with good water resistance, sapphire crystal, a nice titanium case, great movement, great loom, a nice strap, a nice design, a lot of colorways for folks who are a little bit less basic EDC than I am, at a price that makes this very, very attractive for folks, and much more so than I think a lot of Formex's general work, which tends to be in that $1,500 to $2,000 range. Sure, the design, the font are a little polarizing. I do bemoan the lack of a factory bracelet here, as well as the fact that the rubber bracelet that they've already got doesn't fit it well, at all. The hour and minute hands do blend in a little bit at night. The lack of chronometer grading is a little sad. The curvature on the dial is just strange. Love to see some more size options. It's not particularly dressy. I wish the leather was a little bit more impressive. The clasp was a little more adjustable. And the orangey loom isn't my thing. But ultimately, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed here because Formex has done yet another really nice sort of thing with their signature amounts of effort and great technical precision. And I think they've done it at a price point that's going to get more people interested in it than normal. And honestly, I think this is going to be a watch that's going to be very interesting to a lot of people who may not be interested in a lot of other watches, right? Most of those of you who follow my channel regularly know that I am mostly a knife, and at this point I'm about half-half, but I also review in the everyday carry space, looking at, for instance, pens and watches and pocket knives and things like that. And for a lot of people, the idea of watches as jewelry in that world, that is, it's not a particularly interesting idea for them. And so the idea of a bead-blasted titanium field watch with great loom, great functionality, this may end up scratching an itch for a lot of people who've not been historically super interested in the watches that I've shown off on the channel, right? It is a very different design, and I think this is unfortunately going to get a lot of people into watches. They've also filled a hole in their lineup, right? They've given something that is still internally quite fancy, but it's externally minimalist. It's thin and lightweight, and it makes it something that is very much a field watch, because that's not really something they had in great measure before, but it has a unique style and feature set that keep it from feeling like just another Hamilton, which is a very common feeling that I have about field watches. So many of the, hey, we made a field watch entries are just rehashings of the same idea. This doesn't feel that way. So, there are lots of other options out there. You can get amazing quartz pieces for, way less than the price of this. And there are plenty of field watches out there for less. Like I said, Hamilton makes 1 billion field watches, most of which are going to be available for maybe half the price of this. And particularly if you don't care about the weight of the titanium or some of the technical things, they're going to be good to go. They're going to be fine. But that said, when I got the press release for this, when they sent that out with the embargo, I just said, I think I mailed back, you know what? Screw it. Let me order one. I'm just kind of surrendered at that point, right? Because, I could do the review sample game, but I just kind of went for it. I've been impressed enough with their work that it seemed like a solid bet, and it was. It's a really good watch. Because of the combination of technical execution, design, and price point, I think this is absolutely 100% a gem. If you like the design, if you like the way they've done things, you like all of these kinds of things, you are absolutely going to love this watch. And on the Velcro, if this is a look that is appealing to you, oh my God, is this thing going to be perfect for you? So ultimately, if you're looking for a really nice tool watch, you're loving this particular style, and you're willing to plunk down some cash for it, then I think this little guy right here is truly outstanding in its field. Because it's a field watch. Okay, anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Time for me to wrap up this blasted review because it's a bead blasted game. Okay, bye now.